Speciation. Any underlined words in yellow are important to this chapter in this unit, so just take note of that. What is speciation? Speciation is the formation of new and distinct species in the course of evolution. So we're going to talk a little bit about the speciation by barriers. There's 3 different kinds. There's physical, pre-zygotic, and post-zygotic. So physical can include natural disasters, man-made barriers such as lakes or mountains, etc. The pre-zygotic barriers is temporal, which is when the organisms will breed at different times of the year, so they can't breed. Second is mechanical, that's when the sperm can't be transferred to the egg. And the last is behavioral, and that's when the behavior is different, so the species don't interbreed. An example of that would be there's 2 different birds with 2 different species of birds that have different mating calls, and so they don't necessarily attract one another, and so therefore they don't breed. Post-zygotic barriers. That includes hybrid sterility. That's when 2 different species may and create new offspring. The second is hybrid inviolability, and that's when there are too many sex chromosomes, so they can't reproduce. And the last is polyploidy, and that's when the number of chromosomes in an organism cell doubles. So they go from haploid to tetraploid, and the organism has more chromosomes than other individuals of the same species. So that means that they can't mate with other individuals. In animals, they usually die, but in some plants, they will survive. Here we have 2 different types of speciation. I only included 2. There are actually 4 because peripatric and parapatric are both very similar to both of these, so it's not really important to distinguish between the 2. It's only important to distinguish between these 2 extremes. We have allopatric, which is when there are 2 groups that have different lands, so there's this barrier distinguishing them, and basically leads to a geographic change. Is similar to parapatric. And there's sympatric, and that's when 2 groups have the same land, and that leads to genetic change, and it's most similar to peripatric. So here's different diagrams of speciation. The first is phylogenetic trees, and they are factually supported, and they basically show the evolutionary history. Over here we have a root, which is the initial branch, and as the tree increases, it's increasing with time. So over here is the oldest evolutionary history, and here's the most modern. Now we have cladograms, and they hypothesize for how evolutionary change has occurred. And there are clades that represent an organism and all of its descendants. So we could say that primates and rodents and rabbits, this is a clade, and it would also include all of its descendants over here, but it would exclude crocodiles and birds because they're not descendants. So here we're going to talk about how fast speciation occurs. So the first term is punctuated equilibrium that you should know, and speciation is marked by, it means that speciation is marked by isolated episodes of rapid speciation between long periods of little or no change. So basically that means the speciation will occur in a short time, then pause, then short time, and then it will pause, and so on. And the change isn't gradual. But gradualism is when the speciation rate happens gradually. So that brings us to speciation rate, and that is how fast speciation occurs, either fast or slow. And most scientists believe that the speciation rate is relatively fast because there's no transitional fossils that they have found. Well, there's relatively little amount of transitional fossils they have found. Some important terms to know is adaptive radiation, and that is when there's an unexploited new area that organisms can change niches, resources, or challenges. Then we have the founder's effect, which is a loss of genetic variation that occurs when a new population is established by a very small number of individuals from a larger population. So here's a diagram that I'll explain to you on how that works. So there, we'll say these are two different species, the orange and the blue dots. And the population that it can create are there's three different types, and that includes the orange dots, and it includes the orange and blue dots, and then it also includes the blue dots. So there's just three different populations that can basically be formed by this founder's effect. Then we have the bottleneck effect, and that's when this population's size is reduced for at least one generation. So the easiest way to think about that is by a bottle, an actual bottle. And so I'm just using the same colors again to show you as if these were actual species. So now I have included pink though, because it's important to see that the original population includes more species, but as the population size is reduced, the species may be limited. So that concludes the video of speciation.